as I mentioned, today we are, our presentation today is Caring for Your Spirit. I wanted to start by asking that everyone please mute your phone your microphone when you're not speaking. This webinar is currently streaming on Facebook Live, and it will be uploaded to our YouTube page. Please use your chat box if you have any questions during the presentation. You can ask me directly, or if you, at the time of Q&A, you'd like to come off of mute, you're more than welcome to do so. Facebook Live watchers, we ask that you please ask questions in the comments section. This presentation is brought to you by the Office of Community Engagement and Cancer Health Equity. As I mentioned, my name is Erica Rodriguez, and I am the Latinx Outreach Specialist for the office. Today's speaker is Ms. Marsha Sumner. She is the Manager of Spiritual Care at UChicago Medicine. Thank you so much, Marcia, for being here today. If you'd like to go ahead and share your screen, I will stop sharing on my end.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to join you all on Webinar Wednesdays. I have fashioned this presentation perhaps more towards the people who are experiencing cancer or other serious illnesses. But for those of you who work with that community, I hope there will be something here for you as you work with them and share with them as well. My name again is Marsha Sumner, and I manage the spiritual care department at the University of Chicago Medicine, of course. And that department houses the chaplains. And of course, what we're all about is caring for the human spirit as part of whole person care while people are in the hospital. Today, I want to share with you some thoughts on, except I'm not sure how this is going to let me advance it. So I'm going to share it a different way just so that I can do this. I'm sorry that it's not your whole screen. But hopefully you'll be able to get it because I don't know how to do this otherwise. So today I want to be sharing with you some thoughts on post-traumatic growth. You know, at the hospital, we know a lot about trauma. Our level 1 trauma center is one of the busiest in the city, and it only gets busier every day. And we see, you know, many affected by community violence on the South Side. We see the trauma of motor vehicle accidents that can change a life in an instant. Sometimes we refer to the trauma in our emergency rooms as trauma with a capital T. At the same time, if you have received a cancer diagnosis, you may argue that cancer is also trauma with a capital T. And if you support someone who has received a cancer diagnosis, you may second that claim. A cancer diagnosis is trauma with a capital T for those who have it and those who love and support them. And I want to introduce you to this book, Trauma Stewardship. Trauma has many emotional and psychological effects that linger. You've probably heard of post-traumatic stress. That's a mental health diagnosis that refers to those lingering effects when they're so severe that they impact your quality of life and your ability to engage life in a meaningful way. But you do not have to have PTSD or PTS for trauma to impact your life. Lingering effects of trauma can cause flashbacks to hearing a diagnosis, can cause nightmares, anxiety, depression, lack of sleep or appetite, and so much more. Laura Lipsky wrote to this book, Trauma Stewardship, an Everyday Guide to Caring for Self While Caring for Others. And I recommend it because it's practical. It helps you identify problems and then gives you some practical ways through them. Then she has this list of what she calls 16 warning signs of trauma exposure response. These are coping mechanisms we develop to get through something as traumatic as a cancer diagnosis. And these are important. In the moment, you wouldn't survive without them. So there's no shame, there's no blame. They're necessary. I'm going to give you a moment to look at the list and see if you identify with any of them in particular. I identify with a couple of these as I look over them. Number 8, deliberate avoidance. There was a time in my life when a great trauma happened and I was forced to leave the environment where I'd lived for 18 years and raising a family and everything. And I was forced to move to a new community where I didn't know anyone. I was a new single mom now, and it was so traumatic. Life was just completely different. And we moved at the beginning of summer, and both my daughter, who was going into 5th grade, and myself, who was going to be starting postgraduate work, had this summer to kind of make this transition. And this new community was really a community. So the neighbors, like 3 different families down the street from us, every night would come out and sit on their front porches and just have a cocktail and talk to each other. And they were so gracious. And of course, they invited my daughter and I to come and join in so that we could get to know each other. I remember thinking, I want nothing more than to curl up in a ball and in my bed and avoid all of this nonsense, all of this hardship of meeting new people. But it was my daughter who pulled me out of it and said, Mom, we have to do this. We have to make new friends, and this is the way that we're going to do it. So she pulled me out of it that summer, and we met those neighbors, and we are still friends with them today. But that was a coping mechanism that I was trying to develop of just avoiding the pain. And then I was looking at number 15, addictions, which is very serious, of course. And we think of addictions as, alcohol or drugs or sex. But I have to say that last winter, about October, I became addicted to Christmas. I always love Christmas. I mean, I always do. I usually start listening to Christmas music, a little sooner than everyone else. Mm-hmm. When it comes, maybe not as soon as it comes on the radio these days, but pretty early. And I do some decorating, and I, will watch some Christmas movies. That's typical. But last winter, it became something that I poured myself into. I listened all the time. I was consumed with Christmas, and I was consumed with Hallmark Christmas movies. And it was, they put out so many. You can just spend your entire day, your entire life watching these movies. It's such an escape into a fantasy where everything turns out fine. There's these little glitches that happen in the little relationships. But in the end, it's going to come out fine. They're going to kiss, and it's going to be happily ever after. Oh, well, we don't really know that because the movie stops, right? It is a fairy tale. But about mid-December, I realized, wow, this has turned into an actual addiction. And it was because of all the trauma that we've all collectively experienced from COVID and it was still going on. And, the chaplains were in the middle of seeing patients and working with families. And COVID was just such a big thing that I had used Christmas as just a complete escape. It had become an addiction. So I can relate to number 15. I'm happy to report that I'm not still watching Hallmark Christmas movies, but the season is coming, right? Oh, so again, these are important coping skills for survival. The truth is, though, that these are not healthy for the long term. You may have heard of the response to fear called fight or flight. That response is essential for survival. If you are a hunter-gatherer and you are being attacked by a big animal, at the same time, what it does to your body can't be sustained, and it will hurt it over the long term. And the same is true of these coping mechanisms. They're essential in the short term, but we need a different response to make it through the long haul. Laura says in her book, many of us develop coping mechanisms that serve us extremely well in the moment. Outside the moment of crisis, they may no longer provide any benefit, but we continue to use them. We're liberated when we accept that what we once did to survive is now destroying us. Those are some strong words, but it's in that liberation that we can experience a phenomenon called post-traumatic growth. In her article, How to Find Meaning in Suffering, Kelsey Killam shares the research of Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun, and they said this: post-traumatic growth is when a person experiences positive changes resulting from a major life crisis. It turns out that this is most often related to actively looking for something good in something terrible, some meaning or purpose in that trauma with a capital T. And before I go on, I want to say that, some of you may be at the beginning of a journey. You may still be in shock and just struggling to cope. And so you may need to tuck this away in the back of your spirit for another day, another spot in the journey. But it is possible that distress and growth can occur simultaneously. There are 5 positive changes that Killam identifies as signaling post-traumatic growth. So let's look at those together. First one is personal strength. Facing challenges can reveal just how strong we are. I mean, think about it. You don't need that strength until you need it. And that's the only time you'll see it. But then the knowledge of that strength, of overcoming challenges, will provide you with proven courage when you face another challenge. And so personal strength is a sign of that post-traumatic growth. The second one is relationships. So here, growth can be seen on a couple of levels. Suffering can actually bring people closer. Sometimes that's family and friends that are coming near to support you, and the bonds grow deeper because of that. Or it has been shown that sharing your experience with others who have gone through similar things or are going through similar things can help heal your own emotional wounds and build relationships with others. One of the great areas of relationship building comes when your own experience makes you more compassionate to others who are going through times of suffering. I'm in the business of compassion. Chaplains are in the business of being compassionate people. But I always say that my compassion has come through the hardships that I've experienced over the course of my life. And the same can be true for others as well. The next one is greater life appreciation. So something like a cancer diagnosis can shift our focus. It can help us see what's really important to us and can lead us to living a life with more intention. It can also make us appreciate things that we take for granted or have become, we've begun to take them for granted. One way to sustain this growth is to make a gratitude journal that you can refer to when you need those times of pick-me-up and you need to be reminded that there are wonderful things in life, even in the midst of the suffering and pain. Now, I started a gratitude journal. I had great intentions. It didn't last long, but I recovered it the other day and read through the one page that I had written. And it was amazing. Things that I don't think of normally, but on the day that I had entered it in that journal, had come to my mind and I had written it down. And it was amazing to go through that. It really lifted my spirits. It reminded me of things that I forget on an everyday basis. So I encourage that as something that you might practice as giving you greater life appreciation, even in the middle of suffering at times. The fourth sign of post-traumatic growth is related to our beliefs. Suffering and trauma challenge, or they can challenge, our deepest held beliefs about meaning and purpose in life. And for some people, that will involve their religious beliefs, right? And it can go either way. Some people will re-examine those beliefs and draw closer to them, hold them more tightly. Others, it will be a time of distress and questioning of the beliefs that they have held so tightly. But regardless, either way it's going, it's an opportunity to re-examine those beliefs. And either they will evolve or they will be reaffirmed. And it's not always religious beliefs. People find meaning and purpose in many different things in their lives. And this is a time when those things can be re-examined and reaffirmed, or can be tweaked and changed for this new season of life. And then finally, new possibilities. When old ways are no longer available to us, we are forced to become creative. And we're able to think with the poet Mary Oliver, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? It gives us an opportunity to look beyond where we have been and be creative in what we plan for the rest of our life, or even just the rest of today. So I hope you're encouraged today that there can be meaning in suffering. There can be personal growth in the midst of whatever trauma you may be experiencing and beyond. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for your wonderful presentation. It gave us an opportunity to reflect on how we respond to trauma. So I really appreciate you also sharing your own personal story. And I was wondering, does anyone have any questions for Marcia today? I was also going to ask you, the book you referred to by Laura Lipsky, if maybe later we can get the title and send it in the follow-up email to everyone, that would be great.
Absolutely.
So does anyone have any questions for Marcia today? Yeah, okay. Well, like
any comments, I would love to hear from you.
Yes. This is a great question. How do you move I'm so sorry. How do you move past the fear of reoccurrence?
That is a great question, and a fear that is certainly, it's common, it's real, right? And I think that may be cliche, but there is truth in living in the present. In focusing on what we can control rather than what we can't control. And we can't really control that reoccurrence. But if that's what we dwell on, then we miss out on today. So my thought would be focus more on today if that's possible, and get others to help you in that as well. I'm not sure that you can always eliminate that fear because it's real, but by focusing more on today and making the most of
I'm sorry. Marcia, are you there? If everyone can just give me 1 second. Oh, there you are. You're on mute.
So sorry, I got kicked off there for a moment.
I didn't know if it was me or if it was you. Okay. So we have another question by the same person, and it's, and what about the fragments of anger that one may feel as a result of their trauma?
Right. Well, I think that anger is one of those coping mechanisms, right? It's not all bad and can give you energy too. In fact, anger can be transformed into energy that moves you into positive things. So I wouldn't look at it always as something that's horrible. Of course, if it is keeping you from your best life, then that is a problem. And maybe seeking some help or talking to your friends, maybe that would help you. But another way to think about it is, this is energy that I can transform and use into doing something that is positive for myself, something I enjoy doing. Yeah.
Well, does anyone have any other questions or comments? I think that this has been a wonderful presentation. You've given us, there's some hope in those moments of uncertainty and how we can cope with those, with the fear, with the anger. So I really thank you for taking the time to meet with us today.
Absolutely.
So,